the three of you, really four of us, if I include myself, have indicated that, look, we know the prevalence of Christianity in the Black community. Why is it in 2021, as of the time of this video, why is this still such a thing? Why is it still so prevalent? Why are there more Black people who are Christian than white people even? Because I guess the question I'm asking is, was this religion given to Black people, to Black Americans by white people? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so to go sort of work backwards.
Before you answer that, not to cut you off, do me a favor, put that last comment back on the screen, because that was a $20 from David Smalley.
Can I say this really quick?
Sure.
David Smalley, I am such a big fan of yours. I'm really fangirling right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just, as a white atheist with several religious Black family members, we discussed church's role in their culture and freedom. So how can white atheists offer respectful challenges to Black Christians without offending Black culture?
Oh, you
yeah. So I think the answer is almost the same as the one I was going to give to the last question you asked. So, to that point, Black culture is almost synonymous sometimes with the religion that it takes on. So, I think you first have to be able to connect with Black people who reside on the same side of the religious argument that you do. It's very similar to arguments about racism in America. I think you have to find common ground with people who look the same as the people that you might have a disagreement with, because at least they can carry your message a little bit easier than you can, without making it feel like you're the white guy who has all the answers, sort of. At least that would be my advice. So to the point of like, why is it still so prevalent, and is this still is this something that was sort of passed on to Black people? Yeah, I think so. But the other part of Black culture that made this such a stronghold is this element of tradition and respect for elders. It creates this environment in which questioning things is very much frowned upon. To Cynthia's story earlier about just providing feedback, even something as simple as just trying to make each other better, that has a hard time passing through because it's seen as a challenge to authority. And to the point that Mike was making earlier about was he ostracized? It felt like lonely. I think part of the reason I had a lot easier of a time when I was younger is because the emotional dependence, I think, that a lot of Black people grow up with around this community that they surround themselves with, I didn't necessarily have. I've always been someone who's a little bit more comfortable on my own. So if I was to be challenged by my Black community and they said to me, well, like, either, you're not Black enough, you don't get it, I'm okay with, you not getting it. And that's all right. Like, I can be the guy in the corner that you guys talk about at the cookout. All right, cool. Like, I'm all right with that. But I think a lot of people aren't, because I have a lot of the few Black friends that I do have in real life, I think are closer to the agnostic side than they are to any religion they've ever been exposed to. The problem, though, that they find in their own lives is that the people around them who they've grown up with are so religious that to say that out loud is to really ruffle feathers.
They're probably not open about it.
Exactly. Yeah, they aren't. But that's something you only talk about with other people that you feel comfortable with, that won't, sort of turn their, their eyebrow up at you. So I think that's a big reason why it's so prevalent now, and that I think there's a lot of people who logically, a lot of Black people who have gotten to the point where we are, just from the reasoning it through, but they literally can't even say it. And I think there would be a lot more of them if we were able to talk about it without feeling like I feel like sometimes we're made to believe that by challenging the authority figure, we are the degradation of the Black community because we disagree. And I think there's somewhere along the line, we've conflated trying to make each other better by having a difference of opinion with challenging authority and therefore breaking down, you know, morality and everything else that we hold dear. You know, sometimes tradition is meant to be broken down because it wasn't a good tradition to begin with. And I think we have to be able to be willing to admit that to ourselves.
And there's something to be said when you talk about tradition, you know, yes, it is traditional in the African-American community, but when we look back through our history and we see all of the great civil rights leaders, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and you see even the civil rights leaders of today, you've got, you know, Reverend Al Sharpton, and everyone was Reverend this and Pastor that and Preacher this. And they were doing good things for the African-American community in other ways. And so have we conflated like the good things that they've done with this idea that this is God and this is God's work, and that's why so many people are holding on so dear to it, that, you know, it's not just these brilliant men who wanted to fight hard to make change, but it was God who was doing it, and you're turning your back on God. If you live in the United States and you are of African-American descent, you kind of your ancestors were given the Bible. They were allowed to have church. I think it was the one thing that they were allowed to have as a community. So it seems to make sense that this is something that the master wanted Black people to believe in. What are your thoughts about that? And particularly, you know, I want to look a little bit at the Bible and the verses that talk about slavery. They just seem very convenient to keep Black people being slaves, and that was my perspective when I got to the verses about slavery. But
yeah, right. It's kind of a hand-me-down religion, right, for Black people in America. It's, to me, surprising that, yes, you know, if this is your time away from picking cotton in the fields and being whipped or whatever, and you're allowed to sit down for a minute and sing a song and maybe get a little bit of water, why wouldn't you go do that, right? Everybody and their mom's going to go to this gathering to go sit down, even if you don't believe it. You know, you go enough times, eventually you'll just conform and be a part of the group. But it's surprising to me that even, you know, 6 generations after that, or even, you know, let's fast forward and go even after, you know, civil rights and things of this nature, this is still, as John was saying, right, there's this tradition, but it's not really that safe haven as it was from the environment that you were leaving, right, in the field, right? It's not really in that aspect. It becomes more of a and this is going to sound a little bit harsh, but it to me looks like more of a social massaging, right? This is our escape from society at large, right, where we can talk about Black issues in and of itself. It so happens to keep the name of a church, and maybe there will be some, you know, preaching going on at some point. So I think that's kind of why it was kind of delivered to the Black people and then kind of nurtured in that way over time, was because it was it became a safe space for, you know, anything under the sun, really. As far as the slavery aspect of it, I mean, if you ask any Black Christian of any denomination, how do you feel about this aspect of it? You know, specifically, we can go to Exodus 21, right? That's that's going to be the biggie, right?
There's Leviticus 25.
Yeah. I mean, if you bring up even like a verse like that, and you say, how do you feel about the loophole of them, you know, bringing you in, marrying you off to, you know, one of the female slaves, and then you have a child, and then when you're supposed to go free, they keep the child and the woman. And then, of course, you're going to be depressed, and then, you know, the piercing the ear with all of that. You know, how do you feel about that? Don't you think that is a little bit nefarious in the sense of keeping you as property and passing you down and things of this nature? And how do you feel about that? I mean, the average response that I get from a Black person, man or woman, is, you know, that was just something of the time, or they don't really apply that to the now and their day to day. They're, you know, very much cherry picking, and you know, but I don't knock them for cherry picking, because obviously, if you're skipping over,
it's the same answer that you tend to get from white Christians who believe it. I tend to get. I get that answer from any Christian, regardless of what color they are, if they believe in the Bible. that seems to be the answer that they go to. That, well, that's just how it was at the time. God was just regulating slavery. He made rules to make it better. It wasn't slavery. It was the nice, happy, friendly kind of slavery.
Nice, happy, friendly slavery. Right. This is whips and tassels.
Thank you, David.
Right? No, but
yeah, David is the man. Like, when are you coming on the show, David? You got a free invitation to this show. We appreciate that.
Dave is the man. Dave is the man right now.
Dave is the man.
But I just wanted to add really quick. Imagine, all right, you have that whole aspect of slavery right there in your face, and they're kind of, for lack of a better term, whitewashing it to, you know, be kind of this watered down version of, you know, what it is in today, right? But imagine if at some point some Black person who was religious had stepped away and decided, we're going to create, I don't know how to give this example cleanly. What about like something like an NAACP, YMCA / let's hang out social place, right? And kind of seeing the experiment play out and say how many would dwindle off and say, hey, maybe we can do everything we've been doing. We just don't have to tithe, right? I have to pay my bills, right? Or whatever it is. We don't have to, you know, et cetera. We can just kind of taper off into, and that would have been, I think, a good progression for the Black community in and of itself. A lot of the humanistic aspects of our day-to-day, as far as that checklist is concerned, right, I feel like is impeded by the religion that they're hanging on to. And I kind of look at that and say, why wasn't that the case? Why in 2021, for example, like as you mentioned, would...
By the way, Atheist Cats, that's a good point as well, with the Native Americans being really having a lot of their culture destroyed, you know, by colonialism, and many of them having to either convert to religion to Christianity. But
exactly.